It seems like we are going to be getting a Superman follow-up sooner than we thought. James Gunn has announced that work has begun on the next chapter of the Superman saga. And this is exactly what we'll be talking about in today's video, along with answering some of your mailbag questions. With the release of Peacemaker Season 2 happening in a couple of weeks, James Gunn is once again on the press circuit and talking about the future of the DC Universe. One of the things he addressed was the early release of Superman on digital, a decision that many people found very questionable. While the box office receipts were slowing down for Superman, I think it sets a pretty damaging precedent for the future of theatrically released movies, encouraging would-be ticket buyers to just wait a month so it's available to watch at home. Well, he has elaborated the decision to release Superman so early, and it's directly because of Peacemaker Season 2. The events of Superman will play a very large role in the second season of Peacemaker. He's announced that the original plan was to release Season 2 of Peacemaker in September, giving Superman an extra month to play in theaters. So James Gunn's idea is to give people who were interested in watching Peacemaker Season 2, but for whatever reason weren't able to get out to the movie theaters in the last month, the opportunity to watch Superman at home so they don't miss a single thing when watching Peacemaker Season 2. Now, I get it, but I still do stand by my original sentiment. Consumers will do whatever the easiest option is to save time and money, and releasing a movie on digital checks both those boxes. There are people who will prefer to go see a movie in a movie theater, that's typically my preference, but the vast majority of the general audience would prefer to watch things from the comfort of their own home, and only having to wait a month, opposed to a couple years ago when it was 3 to 5 months, is going to severely cut down on a large group of people who probably would have bought tickets to see the movie. But both James Gunn and the studio must have been very happy with the performance of Superman, despite some of the news stories that you may have read claiming the movie was shy of hitting its break-even point, or just random commenters, I'm sure there's going to be some on this video, calling the movie a bomb. But I promise you, WB would not be fast-tracking a sequel to the movie if they considered it a bomb. James Gunn has announced that he has already completed the treatment, which for those unaware with the process of film production, is a general outline of what the movie will be before the screenplay is written, and he said he hopes to begin production on the next chapter of what he's calling the Superman saga very soon. Currently, the only announced movie to be releasing in 2027 from DC isn't even set in the DC universe. We have the Batman Part 2, part of the Batman Epic Crime Saga, releasing in October, so we could see a Superman follow-up releasing as early as summer of 2027. Now, I like that he didn't directly call the movie Superman 2. Seeing how we have the release of Supergirl next year, I'm wondering if that will continue kind of the larger Superman-related story for the DC universe. Of course, that movie will be its own standalone Supergirl movie, but I'm wondering if maybe Supergirl will have a larger role to play in the future of this Superman sequel. One thing that is absolutely certain, though, James Gunn has revealed that he has no intention of making the follow-up to Superman a Batman team-up World's Finest movie, which, as much as I want to see that movie eventually, I think it's a smarter idea to work for it down the line. The performance of the first movie showed that audiences really care about this character, and I want to see Superman carry a few more movies before he has to split the billing with Batman. Those are my thoughts on the Superman follow-up though, and that's going to do it for the main topic, but as I promised yesterday, today's video is going to be answering a bunch of your mailbag questions. I apologize, I've really fallen behind on answering these, but if you were unaware, if you want to leave a question for me to answer in a future video, you can drop it down below with the hashtag Malbag. Here I tried to pick some of the older ones I've missed, so if I haven't answered your question, I probably have answered it in a previous video or made a video on the topic. But the first question I have to answer here ties into yesterday's video. Roderick8167 asks, if James Gunn likes Zach Cregger's Henchman script, do you think he will fast track it into production like the Clayface movie, or will he wait to put it into production until after he casts Batman, Joker, and Harley Quinn? Great question, thank you so much for asking. I think it depends on the role of each of these characters in the movie. For example, with Batman, I don't think we need to see his face in the movie. I think it would be similar to the way Creature Commandos use Batman already, where we have a general idea of what the character will look like, and we would see Batman Spider-Man from the perspective of a standard criminal, never really having time to identify any features about what he looks like, only getting glimpses of that very iconic silhouette. As for Joker and Harley Quinn, I do think they would need to be cast in order to feature in this movie. If it's heavily inspired by that episode of the animated series, they of course have an on-screen presence, so I think this would be a cool way to introduce those characters to the DC universe. And if the script is good, Zach Cregger's schedule is open, and the budget is low, I don't see why James Gunn wouldn't fast-track it into a 2027 or 2028 release date. I think a big determining factor will be the success of his Resident Evil movie that releases next year. Our next question comes from Tegan, who asks, what's your take if they bring Venom into the MCU? And what actor would you like to see as the new Venom? It has seemed like in recent years Marvel has been making a separation of Eddie Brock from Venom. Insomniac Spider-Man 2 saw the Venom symbiote bond with Harry Osborn instead, and since they did just recently do an Eddie Brock Venom trilogy, I think the MCU adaptation would also move away from Eddie Brock as that character. With Brand New Day featuring Matt Gargan returning as Scorpion, it's possible that the symbiote could go straight to Matt Gargan and completely skip Eddie Brock. We've seen the symbiote bond with him in the comics, or it's possible that maybe we see Flash Thompson return in the future, and they go straight to an adaptation of Agent Venom. But I do think what I want most of all is a faithful adaptation of the symbiote suit storyline. It may be too soon to introduce another version of Eddie Brock, especially since so many fans have really enjoyed Tom Hardy in that role, but that would be the version of the character I would prefer to see. Next question comes from William Cager, who asked if I could discuss The Walking Dead on this channel. I like the comics, I like the games, I just hate everything the AMC show has done after season 1. I'm sorry if that answer disappoints you, I would just prefer to talk about things I enjoy. Our next question comes from a little bit of Son, who asks, what movies do I want to see remade in live action? Now, you mentioned Treasure Planet, which I think is a really great movie, but I do think the charm of that movie is the fact that it is animated. And I think the biggest problem a lot of the live action adaptations run into is instead of trying to perfect things that didn't work really well in the animated version, they instead just try and recreate those moments in live action instead, which is why my answer would be to remake Titan AE. That was an animated movie I watched a lot growing up, and I think there are interesting ideas in the movie. Some of the animation is just not aged very well. It's not very well remembered, so I think the opportunity to make a better version of that movie is there, and it is something I think could work in live action. Our next question comes from the Lore Cookie, who asks, what are some of my favorite novels? This is a big question, but I do really enjoy Cormac McCarthy's The Road. Jeff Vandermeer's The Southern Reach trilogy is another one of my favorites, and something I read recently was Gabrielle Zevin's Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. Just a few books that I could think of off the top of my head. And our last question for today comes from Will the Kid, who asked, if I had to write an Avengers-like movie following a theoretically good version of Quantumania, and all of the surrounding controversies involving the actors did not happen, how would I write Kang in with all the other characters as well as the multiverses? Now, this is a pretty large question, and I'm going to try and answer it to the best of my abilities, but I feel like I have to state a couple ground rules. My theoretical good version of Quantumania would have ended with both Kang and Scott Lang losing. Instead of Hope returning to help Scott defeat Kang, Scott would instead have to hold Kang back from returning through the portal, demanding it to be closed, and sacrificing himself to be exiled into the quantum realm along with Kang, and leaving his fate ambiguous until the Kang Dynasty. Now, the Kang Dynasty itself would be about all of the Kang variants, waging a full-on multiversal war that was originally alluded to in Loki Season 1. This would lead to the overall destruction of the multiverse, with the only surviving Kang variant being Kang the Conqueror from Quantumania, being the one to rebuild the universe as Battleworld. Having the past like 20 or so minutes to think about it, I don't know if I even really love that outcome, and if Marvel had the opportunity to keep that storyline going, makes me wonder if in a universe where there were no issues with Kang the Conqueror, that Marvel would just hard shift into Doctor Doom here anyways. But I think that's going to do it for today's video. I wasn't able to answer all the mailbag questions that I wanted to, so I will be answering more in tomorrow's video. And of course, I will be continuing to answer mailbag questions, so if you have any last minute ones, drop it in the comments down below with the hashtag mailbag. Thank you again so much for watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed this video, subscribe for more content, and I will see you in the next video.